Welcome to another slow journey through time. You're on Quest Frontier. Tonight we step into a world of frost and fire, of thick wool cloaks and colder mornings, of wooden walls that creak against the wind, stories whispered by firelight. We're traveling to the far north, to the rugged lands of the Vikings, but not for battle. It's not for ships or raids or heroes sung in sagas. No. This is something quieter, gentler, more intimate. Tonight, you will pass a full winter inside a Viking longhouse, a single shared space where families, animals, smoke, and silence settle together for months, a place where time stretches slowly, where daily life becomes ritual, where the outside world, harsh, frozen, endless, is kept just barely at bay. This will be a story of survival, not against enemies, but against the cold. A story of how people lived, endured, and waited. Together, we'll begin with a soft walk through the rhythm of daily winter life inside the longhouse. Then, we'll follow the quiet path of a single winter through one man's eyes. Next, we'll explore the beliefs, the symbols, the rituals of winter, how the Norse understood darkness, time, and the return of light. And finally, we'll compare the lives of the humble and the powerful, those who shared smoke and hay with goats, and those who feasted behind carved wooden walls. But all of it, slow, steady, wrapped in fur and firelight. Let the noise of your day fall away now. Breathe. Prepare to settle in for a long Nordic winter. Imagine waking not to the sun, but to darkness. Not the soft darkness of night ending, but the deeper kind. The darkness of a northern winter morning that still feels like night. The fire has burned low. A faint red glow pulses beneath the ash. The room smells of smoke, wool, and old wood. You lie on a low bed of hay, topped with sheepskins that scratch but keep you warm. Beside you, your brother breathes deeply. Beyond him, the shape of your mother curled tight beneath a thick cloak. Further still, the animals, a goat, 2 sheep, and a few chickens, huddle in their corner, not yet stirring. There are no windows, only small slits in the walls, mostly blocked for warmth. The air is still, cool, slightly damp. You rise slowly, careful not to wake the others. Your feet find your boots, still stiff from yesterday, and you wrap a woolen shawl around your shoulders. You tend the fire. Not with a match or button, but by gently stirring the ashes, blowing softly, coaxing the red back into orange. It catches, crackles, and once again, light flickers across the timber beams above. Breakfast is simple. Cheese wrapped in linen, a spoonful of dried berries softened with warm water. You eat without speaking. There is no rush. In the longhouse, time is not marked by bells or clocks. It is measured by firewood, by hunger, by chores. And in winter, everything slows. You sweep the floor with a handmade broom, gather droppings into a basket for the compost pile, refill the water barrel from snow that melted near the hearth. Feed the animals. Sometimes you go outside, only briefly. The snow is deep, the air sharp and still. Your breath fogs instantly. The wind bites at any skin not covered. But the world outside is silent, beautiful, even, white upon white. The forest nearby wears a cloak of frost. The fjord is quiet. Sky is pale like washed bone. Inside again the longhouse hums. Children play with carved wooden animals. The elders mend tools or weave baskets from willow. Your sister stirs a pot, barley, onions, dried fish, simple stew that smells stronger than it tastes. There are no feasts, not in winter. You eat to stay full, not to feel pleasure. The hours pass slowly. One chore becomes another. And when there is nothing more to do, you wait. You carve shapes into wood or tell riddles. You listen to stories from your grandmother, tales of gods and giants and wolves with golden eyes. Sometimes a visitor arrives, wrapped in furs, their face barely visible, bringing word from another village or simply passing through. They are welcomed, given soup, and a place by the fire. No one travels far in winter. But when they do, they are treated with care, 'cause all know what it means to be caught. In the snow, at night, candles flicker in shallow bowls. The air grows smoky again. Laughter fades. The animals settle, and one by one, you lie down again, wrapped in furs, pressed close to others, listening to the quiet breathing, the soft snore of a sheep, the groan of timber adjusting in the cold. And outside, the snow continues to fall, and the world waits. Not for spring, not yet. Just for another morning, just for one more fire. His name was Einar, not a jarl, not a skald. Just a quiet man from a quiet valley. Born near the edge of the forest, where the trees leaned over narrow paths like watching elders. He had known 35 winters, some mild, some brutal, but none like this one. The snow had come early. It had not left. At first he thought little of it. Einar was used to winter's hunger. He had split wood in the rain. He had fished through ice. He had buried animals too frozen to eat. But this year, something was different. The deer had vanished early. The streams ran slower, and the sky, it stayed the same pale gray, day after day, as if the world itself had fallen asleep. Einar lived in a longhouse with 9 others. His wife, his sons, his aging father. No neighbors left behind when their own home collapsed under snow, and a boy whose parents had died last spring. They shared everything: heat, food, silence. In the early weeks, it was manageable. They still had flour, dried herbs, mead from the last festival. But as January deepened, so did the cold and the quiet as the woodpile shrank. The goats stopped giving milk. A crack in the roof grew just enough to let the wind sing through at night. Einar tried to stay busy. He repaired the door. He recut old clothes into mittens. He sharpened tools that wouldn't be used for months. But the waiting was the hardest part. The stillness. The knowledge that they could do everything right and still not be spared. His wife, Liv, was the strongest among them. She spoke little. But every night she tended the fire with the same precision. She knew how to stretch flour into flatbread, how to turn animal fat into candles, how to keep the children from sensing fear. Einar admired her, even when he did not know how to help her. On the coldest night of that year, the wind screamed. It shook the longhouse with long, low groans. The children woke. Even the animals stirred, and the fire burned too low. Einar rose in silence, wrapped himself in a fur cloak, and stepped outside. The snow reached his knees. The air cut his throat, but he needed wood. He walked to the pile, already half gone, and began to gather an armful. And there, under the moonlight, he saw something unusual. A set of footprints, too small for a man, but too large for any animal he knew. moving slowly along the tree line, then vanishing. He stood for a moment, frozen not by cold, but by thought. There were no visitors, not this deep in winter, and yet something had passed. He said nothing when he returned, just added wood to the fire, held his youngest son for a while longer, and stared into the flames. The next day, he and Liv whispered she had seen strange shapes at dusk, and once, the goats had begun bleeding for no reason. Einar didn't believe in omens, but he did believe in caution. He fastened the doors tighter, stuffed straw in the roof gap, and kept the axe close. But nothing came. The days passed, one bowl of stew at a time. One cracked bowl repaired with twine. One small story told to make the children sleep. They spoke of spring, of green fields, sunlight that lasted more than an hour. But they said it gently, like a blessing not to be spoken too loudly. And eventually, the snow softened, the roof stopped moaning, and the goats began to stir with more life. One morning, the frost on the door melted before midday, and Liv smiled. It was a small smile, but Einar held on to it, like light. He had survived, not by bravery, not by strength, but by endurance, by listening to silence, and by keeping the fire lit. Winter, in the Viking world, was more than just a season. It was a presence, spirit that arrived not only in snow and ice, but in silence, in stories, in ritual. When the fields froze and the sun rose late and low, people turned inward. They looked to memory and to myth. The Norse believed that the world had been born from ice and fire, from the cold realm of Niflheim and the blazing land of Muspelheim. And so, every winter felt like a return, quiet reminder of the world before warmth. As the nights grew longer, they marked time with care. There was no calendar in every home, but there were rhythms. It's the winter solstice. The darkest night was sacred. It marked the beginning of a festival that lasted many days, celebrating not just survival, but hope. In the longhouse, it was a rare time of joy. Candles were lit, more than usual. A special loaf was baked, sometimes with nuts or dried fruit. Saved carefully from the fall, elders told stories, not of heroes, but of gods wandering in winter. Of Odin, the All-Father, riding across the sky in a long cloak, accompanied by his wolves and ravens, seeking wisdom. Some believed Odin passed near during the solstice, and so a bowl of mead might be left by the door, token, a greeting. In later Christianized times, Odin's ride blurred with another figure, a gift-giver in the night. But the roots ran deeper. Children were told to behave, not because of punishment, but because the gods were watching, always watching. Homes were decorated with evergreen branches, not for beauty, but as symbols of life that endured through the frost. In the darkest nights, they sang, not loudly, not for performance, but softly, to remind themselves that voices still mattered, and that spring still remembered their names. Outside, torches were lit. Circles formed in the snow. And in some places, fires were built and allowed to burn for hours, as if defying the darkness itself. Those with more would share with those with less. A cut of meat, a slice of bread, because winter was a shared burden. But not all rituals were joyful. Some feared spirits of the cold, those who roamed the forests, the hills, the open sea, and so charms were carved, runes painted on doorways, ashes placed at thresholds, not because people expected to see a ghost, but because they had learned to respect the unseen. In burial sites, archaeologists have found amulets placed alongside the dead, Thor's hammers, solar symbols, animal carvings, not for war, but for safe passage through winter and beyond. The Norse saw Ragnarok, the end of the world, as beginning with Fimbulwinter, a winter that never ended, 3 seasons of snow, no crops, no warmth, no sun, and so each real winter was survived, with a trace of that fear that perhaps this time it would not thaw. But the days did grow longer, always eventually. The sun rose a bit higher, the snow softened, birdsong returned, and when it did, the people gave thanks. Not with temples, not with parades, but with quiet acts. Planting, pairing, singing again. The rhythm of Viking winter life was not only hardship, it was endurance layered with meaning. A life where stories lit more than the hearth. They lit the mind. They kept the cold outside. Even now we find echoes of those stories. In solstice festivals, in evergreen wreaths, the comfort we find in small lights on long nights. Winter, they believed, was a test, not just of the body, but of the spirit. And those who passed were the ones who kept singing. Winter came for everyone, but it did not come equally. For most Vikings, farmers, fishers, weavers, children, winter meant caution, stretching supplies, waiting for light, enduring the cold one breath at a time. But for the jarls, the chieftains, and the wealthy, the season looked a little different. Their longhouses were larger, better built, with thicker walls of timber, sometimes double layered with moss packed in between, a stone hearth at the center, ventilation crafted with care, enough room to walk upright without brushing the beams overhead. They had servants, often thralls or enslaved people, to carry wood, prepare meals, repair clothing, care for animals, and stoke the fire through the night. Their winter food was not just stew and porridge. It included salted meats, smoked fish, preserved fruits, and cheese. Honey-sweetened mead poured from carved pitchers, bowls made of horn or silver. Decorative tapestries warmed the walls, furs lined the benches. Oil lamps burned longer into the night. They hosted guests, offering shelter and stories to visiting warriors or traders. Feasts might still be held, especially during not extravagant by modern standards, but rich in comparison to the quiet hunger of the poor. A bard might sing, a skald might recite old poems, some with hints of prophecy, some reminding all present of their ancestors might. Yet even in these halls, the cold found its way in. A jarl might have wealth, but even he could not summon spring early, or protect his children from illness, or keep all wolves away from his herds. In many ways, the wealthy bore different burdens, more mouths to feed, more expectations, more to lose. And sometimes they retreated into rituals of control. A rune carved into a favorite bowl, a blessing spoken before lighting the hearth, a dream interpreted by a passing seer, who was fed, thanked, and sent on her way, with a pouch of herbs and a wary glance. Meanwhile, the poor lived more closely with nature. They could not command it, but they understood it. They listened to the wind, watched the sky, traced changes in the frost. Their survival depended not on comfort, but on awareness. They shared what little they had: a candle stub, a cloth patch, story passed down to calm a child. In the smaller longhouses, people slept shoulder to shoulder. Cold, yes, but together. No room for secrets, no place for pride. And sometimes the distinction between high and low vanished altogether. A storm would collapse a roof. Disease would silence a strong man. Starving wolf would not check a family's status before attacking. Winter reminded everyone, as powerful or poor, that no one stood above the cold. Still, those with means recovered faster. They restocked their larders first. They rebuilt their fences sooner. They planned marriages, alliances, and voyages, while others simply celebrated being alive. But in the sagas, the ones remembered are not always the richest. Sometimes it is the one who braved the snow to help a neighbor, or the one who sang when the others had grown too tired to try. Winter leveled the field, just a little. It carved into the prideful. It polished the quiet. It made the next season feel earned. And now, the longhouse dims once more. The fire sinks low. The wind hushes its voice beyond the wooden walls. And the long winter begins to fade. You've walked through a world of snow and silence, where light is precious, and warmth is earned, where life slows, and every movement carries the weight of intention. You've risen in the cold with the quiet rhythm of daily life, shared the breath of animals and family, wrapped yourself in smoke and wool and patience. You've followed the story of Einar, who kept the fire lit, not just with wood, but with steadiness, with presence. You've explored the myths that carried people through the darkest days, rituals, songs, and stories whispered across centuries. Beliefs not just of gods, but of light returning, of endurance, of waiting well. And you've glimpsed the divide between those who endured with plenty and those who endured with nothing, except each other. Still, the lesson remains. In the Viking world, winter was not the enemy. It was the test, a teacher of patience, of silence, of strength that whispers instead of shouting. And now, as you lie still, perhaps under your own blanket, in your own room, you carry something of that rhythm. Not the hardship, but the stillness. It's the sense that even in the coldest seasons, there is a center of warmth, a hearth within. Let yourself drift now. Let the snow settle. Let the longhouse sleep. Outside, the stars are quiet. Inside, the fire, though low, never truly dies. It waits, just like you. And when the sun returns, you'll rise again. Good night, traveler. Sleep well. And may the stories keep you warm until morning.